Welcome to the Desert Sanctuary with Karl and Laura Forehand.
Often when we have doubts about religion, or we want to be contemplative, or simply ask questions, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert.
We would like to welcome you to our sanctuary, the Desert Sanctuary.
We've tried to pick guests that resonate with our fellow friends and seekers here in the desert.
Our hope is that you will find life for your body, soul, and spirit.
And now, here is our show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary podcast. I'm Laura Forehand, and I'm here with Karl Forehand. And before we start with our extra special guest today, what do you have to share?
Yeah, everything I wanted to share is going to be irrelevant because Karen's episode is going to come out later because of other things that are scheduled. So it probably won't matter. So maybe I'll just skip all the announcements for today and we can just get down to what's important today. And that is interviewing Karen.
Yeah.
Allen.
Yeah.
And, but first, before that, can you tell us who Karen is?
I will tell you. Okay, so Karen Allen has spent the past 22 years in healthcare as a paramedic, facilitator, and hospital administrator. During that time, she led workshops on building strong relationships, focusing on body, mind, spirit balance, courageous cultures, and leadership development. She has always had a passion for community outreach as a CPR first aid instructor, as well as other training courses. At the end of 2022, Karen made the decision to leave the healthcare system where she worked to focus on her own life-work balance. She continues to lead community classes and is living her best life with her husband, Bart, splitting their time between Texas and Colorado and enjoying family time with their combined 6 grown children and 5 grandchildren. And she's my sister.
Most importantly.
Yeah, like normally I totally screw up on the bios. I mess something up, but did you notice how well that flowed? That's probably because I know her so well. Right. Yeah, right. So anyway, we're glad that you're here on podcast. So
yeah, this is interesting. I don't know if any of my family would come on the podcast. So maybe, but maybe only if I was promoting something else or whatever. But this is a privilege to get to hear part of Karen's story. And so, Karen, we were just at your house not too long ago. We could have talked then, right?
Yeah,
we were relaxing. We were busy relaxing, doing anything, and sitting and staring at the pool. And
I was in the pool,
trying not to move too much so I didn't start sweating.
Yeah, it was so hot.
It was hot.
Still is. Yep.
Can you give us kind of a brief story of your religious background as you perceive it? You know, what's been your journey to get to where you are right now? And for a lot of us, that means right now we're kind of open and we don't know what's next. We're still discovering and we're still learning, and that's a good, because we didn't always get to do that before. But we're discovering and learning and moving forward. But how did you get to where you are now?
And I think what you said about discovering and learning now, because we didn't get to do that before, is dead on for me as well. So our family, we grew up in the Lutheran church, and I don't have just a ton of specific memories, but Laura and I have talked about this kind of before, and I have kind of an overview, a broad perspective of just what was expected. And I know that before I knew much about religion, I had this inner feeling of, let's say, who God was to me. And that being was warm and was love and was patient, and there was just nothing negative. And I don't really know the depth of my understanding as a little child, but then I just remember in the Lutheran church, it was very scripted and ritualistic and felt more, I go as far as to say fire and brimstone at times. And it just didn't feel like what I had thought it was. So of course, as a child, I figured, well, I must have been wrong, because all these adults are telling me, well, this is what it is. And, you need to memorize the Nicene Creed, and you need to dissect the Lord's Prayer, and you need to memorize the books of the Bible, and all that. And I just remember thinking, okay, well, this is what it is. And wow, this is not fun. This is not, this is not something I think I'll probably do for the rest of my life, and then I kind of, I just remember as an adult looking back, the vision that kept coming to me was one of, as a child, I just would sit in the pew and just think, gosh, God has me hanging by a string, and he's got a big pair of scissors just waiting to cut ties with me. But yet then you would hear, on the other hand, how, somebody can be a murderer or a rapist or a horrible human being, but, then they can still get into heaven. And I was like, well, why is it if I steal a piece of candy, I was convinced I was going to hell,
Right.
So just a lot of fear. I even remember as a child, one of my really strong memories was the prayers that we prayed, not just the Nicene Creed and the Lord's Supper, but, just before dinner, it was what? God is great, God is good, let us thank him for our food. That was it, amen.
Right.
And then before bed, it was now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take.
Mhm.
And I would go to bed crying. I would cry myself to sleep, because I thought, I cannot remember every bad thing I did today to ask forgiveness. And what if I die in my sleep?
Right.
There's no guarantee, And I remember one night I came out, and, I was crying, and I went to our mom, and I just, told her that. And I do appreciate what she said. She just said, I don't think that, God would want you to pray that prayer if that's how it makes you feel. But she didn't even have the tools to give me any alternative or any other words. So I just stopped saying it. But then that also, put some guilt in there of, well, now I'm not praying. So
Right.
Mhm.
is that worse? Now, and then, I remember going to confirmation class and thinking, well, this is just an extension of school, and why do I have to do this? And things like that. I just didn't get it. I didn't get it all. And I didn't understand what it meant to be confirmed. I thought that meant I was a voting member of the church, and, I had some kind of a say.
Yeah.
And it just meant I got to take communion, which, so just a lot of rules and regulations that then I think as an adult, because we kind of got away from going on a regular basis, once our parents separated and things like that. And so I really didn't ever, go back to the Lutheran church once we stopped going as kids. But then when I wound up getting into my first marriage, and then they were Southern Baptist, evangelical Southern Baptist, and I thought, well, this is just crazy, and then I kind of felt myself defending the Lutheran church. Like I had to pit one religion against the other, because I felt like that's kind of what they did, because they're telling me, the Southern Baptists are telling me, you're not saved. You can't be. You got christened as a child. You weren't baptized, but yet I thought I had been. I mean, that's what we called it,
Right.
And So there was all this confusion. And if I wanted to join the Baptist church, because they would not accept a letter from the Lutheran church, it had to be a letter from a like-minded, like-believing church.
Right.
So if I wanted to join and be a member with my husband and my new baby and the entire extended family, I had to stand up in front of the whole church as an adult and pretty much confess that here I am, 21 years old, and I don't know God. And
Right.
I'm coming today to say, the prayer, and I'm using air quotes, of
Right.
asking Jesus into my heart. And I just thought that was ridiculous. And I remember going through the motions and getting submerged as a 21-year-old and almost internally rolling my eyes like, this is ridiculous, but it's just one more hoop I've got to jump through to belong.
Right.
Right.
Or, because we've done a lot of work with Brene Brown to fit in, right?
Exactly.
And they want you to feel like you belong, but it's really, you're just conforming to their rules and regulations, like you said, which one of them is baptism, because I went through the same thing. I mean, I was a little bit older than you, but I think I was pregnant with Abby. So I was like maybe 29, 30 at the time, but yeah, so I can totally relate to that story. So one thing you said was like, you had this idea of who God was, this loving, caring Father, if you will, in heaven or whatever. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but who do you think, or where do you think you got that first initial idea of God as being this loving? I mean, I feel like church kind of turned that idea of God on its head, because then you started thinking, I'm dangling from a string kind of thing. But where do you think that first image of God came from, this loving God?
Yeah. And I really don't know. And I've thought about that. And I've thought, is it just as a child, you just have an innocence, you just have a belief, a love, a longing, an openness, and I look at my own grandchildren now, and just, they all have different personalities, and one in particular, Allie, she's just incredibly loving and just adores everyone, and would just hug everyone and be there and just smile at everyone. And eventually she's going to be taught, stranger danger and the negatives of the world and things like that, because she's, so little right now. So I just, I wondered if maybe it just came some kind of internal thing like that, of a combination of my personality, of a empathic, compassionate, wanting, and went on to be a caregiver in my role, my professional role. Did it come from that? Did it come from somewhere within me, and then just nature around me, and the beauty of nature around me, and the wonder of nature around me as a child? And maybe I kind of constructed that into, at the beginning of the religious walk, of, oh, that's who this being is to me, until I got older, and then had more, when I say older, I mean, even 6, 7, 8 years old,
Right.
not old, any older than that, So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it was, just, that love of your parents when you're, 2 and 3 and 4 years old, that fosters that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I know that it was there, and I know that I felt like it was taught out of me.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I always talk about how, when we're little, we're encouraged to wonder and ask questions and all that. And then somewhere along the way, and a lot of times when we get into organized religion, you're taught or told, how you need to think about things. And a lot of times it is that traumatic view of God, that he's just waiting to, like you said, cut the string and be done with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that could also foster into, our relationship with our own father. And, he did walk away. So this could be something that I'm kind of manifesting later in life, that, we didn't have that really. Even as young children, we knew something was wrong with our parents' relationship, and we knew there was this disengagement with our own father, and that could factor into it. And I think that's why, for me, I'm really focusing on not seeing God or the divine or this being as male or female, as I'm just, that just doesn't work for me. And the more people would say, oh, just like every loving father. And I'm like, you can't sit here and compare a divine being to an earthly being. You can't do that. Nothing made sense to me, And then the further into the Southern Baptist, I kind of got hooked in, because it did seem like there was all this freedom. It did, oh my goodness, I get to say whatever prayer I want and God will listen. Oh, wow. I don't have to, be an acolyte and, light the candles and carry the, the banners and things like that. But the more I got into that, it's the same, it's the same song, second verse, and just worded and phrased a little differently as far as I was concerned.
I agree with you.
So a lot of people, when we talk to them, and they're in a high control religion, so Southern Baptist would definitely be one of those. But when they're in a high control religion or a high control family, or maybe a high control marriage, they use this phrase. They say, I just had to get small.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely.
Can you relate to that, and how would you?
Oh yeah. I knew that there was no asking questions. I didn't feel comfortable asking questions at all. We would go to Sunday school. I didn't ask questions in the Lutheran church either. I would say either one. But definitely being an adult, I wasn't an adult in the Lutheran church, but as an adult in the Southern Baptist church, you didn't ask questions. You just, and if you did ask a question or you gave an opposing opinion, it was immediately corrected, And I remember we had a really great Sunday school teacher, and he really questioned the need for asking forgiveness, because if God is all knowing and God is love and God is forgiving, why do we have to ask forgiveness? And I didn't realize, but the Sunday school teachers had to run the topics of their classes by the pastor and maybe the deacons or something like that. And the pastor was just adamantly opposed to that and him doing this topic at all. And it went against the way of thinking of that church. And well, he chose, he said, I really feel strongly about this, and I'd just like to have the conversation. So they allowed him to have the conversation, but they sent the pastor's wife to every single one of those Sunday school classes to counter every point he made and back it up with scripture on why his thinking was not correct, because it was almost like she had to make sure he didn't cause any of us to stray with a new thought.
Yeah. It's interesting how,
wow,
sometimes things like forgiveness and unconditional love, even those things can be abused. And when we have a misunderstanding about them from God, then it's abusive. It's toxic to us. And when we don't understand anyway.
Yeah. Well, and touching on that smallness, I mean, that translated into even my marriage, because my focus was trying to be the best Christian wife, the best Christian mother, doing everything, but not asking, wanting, or expecting any praise or recognition for it. And, you dutifully stand next to your husband. And he wasn't domineering in that way. He was very much a very quiet person. And, but I just knew that if I spoke up and had a voice, one, it would embarrass him, because it would cause attention to us. And, he wasn't comfortable with that. And two, I just didn't think, well, I don't know this stuff. I'm not reading my Bible like they are. I must just not know. And it wasn't that there wasn't anything like intuitive, even though they say, it's it's a feeling in your heart and you just know. And somehow, I guess 9-year-olds just know and ask Jesus into their heart at Bible camp. But, as an adult, I'm over here saying, I guess I just don't know, because the questions weren't encouraged. Everything, if you had a problem and you brought it up, the first thing, as y'all know, was, well, first we need to pray about it. And it's like, well, don't you think I've done that? That's why, it's why I'm sitting here so confused on why it's not working. I've prayed, So, and even the marital problems, that same Sunday school class, over 50% of those marriages ended in divorce. Because we couldn't have conversations about what was real and what was happening.
Yeah.
Mm.
You put on that face and, that then you went home and lived the real life.
Right.
So,
Once you decide that I'm right and God is on my side, then it's pretty much you're stuck there, right?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can't get out of it. The only thing you can do that's quote unquote noble is to defend it, and that's a lot of times what most of the people are doing.
Right. Yeah. And I think, honestly, I think that's probably why when I first changed over to being Baptist after we got married, that's probably why I was so adamantly defending my Lutheran faith, because it's all I knew. And now they're telling me it's wrong. And so, I'm defending, well, at least I know the Nicene Creed, and at least I know this, and at least I got confirmed when I was, 13. So I knew more than these 7-year-olds who are saying they're Christian. I mean, I'm like putting down a 7-year-old, as an adult, because I'm feeling like I'm being attacked for what I believed. And then to have people in the church then ask me about my my family, my extended family's belief. And I remember describing, our mom to somebody, and it was actually a different pastor's wife, and it was earlier. I was probably in my 20s, and she listened as I said, these things about, Mom, and I totally believe our mother is a believer, and she knows who God is for her, and all that. And she looked at me and she said, well, doesn't sound to me like she's Christian. And I was actually on my way to go visit my mom with my oldest daughter. And she said, I really think that when you get there, you need to witness to her, because I don't think she's a Christian at this point in her life. And I believed her,
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised by it,
No.
Not surprised by it. I mean, because we live that, Southern Baptist life as well. So, but it's amazing to me, how people that don't even know the people in your life can make such statements as if they know them, right? Or really anybody, I mean, I remember, it's funny because when I'm going to call him Karl on this podcast.
Yes, okay.
But
there's many alter egos.
That's right. But like at our second church, and they were just the pastor search committee was adamant, he is called by God to be here. But then when they wanted to get rid of us, it was all of a sudden, well, we never really felt like he was called by God. And I'm just like, just statements like that are just so incredibly like damaging and hurtful.
Right.
Like, and I can only imagine, as you're going to, visit Mom, that you're, I don't know what you were feeling, but like for me, I think I would feel just this angst and this like, well, maybe I should say something to her or something.
Yeah. Well, I kind of felt responsible for, and again, air quotes, her salvation. And yet I didn't have the words or the courage to have those kind of conversations. So I didn't.
Yeah.
So
then there was the guilt.
And there's guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
We love that.
But
guilt.
I wonder if it's guilt or is it shame?
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably both. Yeah.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, because I truly do believe that I did something wrong by not speaking up at that time.
Yep.
But then the shame for not being courageous enough.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So in the book that we wrote last fall, Out in the Desert, the second chapter is about being addicted to church. And we kind of make the point that, you know, if you go to a planned concert inside the church, you know, the music is designed to affect you. It's designed to alter your mood.
Evoke emotion.
And evoke emotion. When it does, anything that does that can become addictive. There's a couple of TikTok videos out right now of, it's not real pastors, it's fake pastors giving a sermon about absolutely nothing, but going through all the inflections and they have the emotion behind it and everything. And it sounds like they're really saying something, you know, and it affects you just like the music would. Mm-hmm. Music touches me real deeply. Did you feel any of that? I mean, were there parts of religion, of organized religion, that made you want to come back, you know,
every week?
Yeah. I think for me it was the music for me was huge. That would be what was moving. And I know that it was a Southern Baptist church, and yes, it was evangelical, but it was also conservative. So I remember, you know, wanting to maybe move with the music in some way, or just, you know, something. And I would literally sit on my hands because, oh my gosh, don't you dare stand out. We don't do that here. We're proper. We're, you know, it's kind of, and again, didn't want to cause embarrassment or anything like that, but the music always moved me. And then I think I got addicted to being that servant. And so I was the special ed Sunday school teacher. I had a love for special ed kids. That was my first passion, and what I thought I was going to do with my life was be a special ed teacher. So I volunteered to be the special ed Sunday school teacher. I did vacation Bible school every year, you know, to the point where I was coming up with different skits and different songs and things like that. We were in Sunday school every Sunday. And of course, if you had little kids, then you were expected to also work in the nursery once a month. So, you know, I did all that. My part-time job was in Mother's Day Out at that same church. I mean, I just felt like if they were doing something where I had something I thought I should be doing, I needed to be doing it. But it also fed me. It also, you know, it fed me, and that could be me thinking, you know, okay, I'm getting closer to being this perfect Christian mom, this perfect Christian wife, or whatever I thought I had to be. And, you know, that also probably filled a void that I had in my marriage, just because we weren't living that. Like, you know, I'm hearing that, oh, the husband's the head of the household, and not that he wasn't, but he wasn't leading the prayer at dinner. We weren't holding hands before bed praying. We weren't doing Bible study together. And I don't even think I wanted to, but I think we were supposed to. So when we didn't, I was like, well, I've got to get this fixed somewhere, you know. So I'll get it surrounded by the ladies of the church. You know, oh yes, I did the ladies' Bible study anytime there was one available, you know. So did all of it.
And I mean, when we were just there visiting, by the time this comes out, it'll be a couple months. So like when we were visiting you in June, at the end of June, I mean, I told you that I feel like you and Bart, you both have like your gift, if you will, is acts of service. And so like, I can see how you would want to do all that, because you're just naturally wanting to serve.
Right.
So, but do you feel like in a way, like here's one of our experiences here before we like stopped going to church altogether. We did go to a church really close to our house. And like, I mean, it was literally the second Sunday that we had visited there, and they were already trying to like rope me into, hey, do you play handbells? And, you know, I mean, did you feel like, do you feel like kind of, you know, church, they kind of hone in on those things that maybe you're good at, or that is a gift or whatever? And
yeah, or they just need somebody to do it. Yeah. And a lot of times too, I think it's, you know, they find out you're that the work at home mom. I'm not going to say stay at home mom, but a work at home mom. And, you know, when I had all my children, I had, you know, 4 children, 10 and under, and yet it was still, but you're home during the summer. I mean, why wouldn't you be volunteering to teach Vacation Bible School? Because I'd like to ship my children off to you for a week, you know, it's kind of what I wanted to say.
Well, but I think that's very true about like pastors' wives too. There were a lot of things they assumed that I would just automatically want to do,
right?
Because my title was, I'm using air quotes, pastor's wife, right? But I didn't play the piano. I did not want to work in the nursery because I had small children, and I, like you, wanted a break from them, you know?
Right.
I didn't want to have to teach Sunday school or women's Bible study, but you kind of, I mean, nobody else is jumping at the chance to do it. So there is this part of me that felt like, well, if I don't do it, you know, there's that guilt or whatever. Like I should be doing this because, you know, after all, I'm the pastor's wife. But yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I think a lot of people, like, just like any other addiction, eventually it takes more and more and more. And you just feel like you're never doing enough. You need to fill that void or get that rush, you know. And some of those things are not bad things; they're good things. But you can spend all your time just because the church doesn't want to pay someone to do that, and they can have your volunteer labor. But, so as you kind of move forward. And I don't want to tell your personal life story, but as you move forward and there were other changes in your life and so on, things happen. What changed about your spiritual journey? I mean, to where it is now? We haven't talked about this a lot. You and Laura may have talked more about it. But what changed or shifted, or how is it different?
Yeah. Well, and I don't mind touching on the in between parts there. So, you know, after my first husband and I divorced, and honestly, I think a lot of that with me just throwing myself into the church, it actually made more of a division at home, because I looked at him like, well, you're not measuring up. I even remember an argument where, I'm just going to say the names of our former pastors. It was Bob was the pastor, and Ellen was his wife. And I remember an argument. We're having an argument and about being good Christian people and a good married Christian couple, and we're arguing about it. And I throw at him, well, you're no Bob. And he looks at me and he goes, well, you're no Ellen. And we're like, we're using this as weapons now in our marriage, you know? And I vividly remember that. And that was a real dig to both of us from each other, you know? And then, you know, when we went our separate ways, I remember for a full year, after the divorce, I remember a solid year, all I did was focus on figuring out what the perfect or right Christian woman is. So I threw myself into another Bible study. I didn't date. I didn't look around. I just internally focused, and I read anything I could find, but it was all Christian based. And so then fast forward a year, and I meet somebody in a chance meeting at work, and we wind up maybe about a year later getting married. And he wound up being not only verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, having his own horrific backstory, learning after we were married that he was actually brought up in a cult, a religious cult, that had their own extreme views of the man's role, the woman's role, the child's role, things like that. And just feeling completely trapped. And I was like, I did so much work. I did what I thought I was supposed to do. This is what you give me, God, and this is what I'm stuck with now. And then there was absolutely no way in my mind that I was leaving this marriage because, God forbid, I be twice divorced.
I remember having those discussions with you. Yeah. I remember those. Yeah.
And it wasn't until a couple of the things that were huge with that relationship ending was him starting to try to isolate me. And it was when he told me that my sister, Laura, was no longer welcome, because I was starting to be honest with her and asking her questions like, is this normal? Because I was convinced now this behavior, this emotional, mental abuse was normal.
Right.
And she would just be kind and compassionate and honest and say, no, it's not. And, this, and, so of course he wanted to isolate me from that, that, and then just sitting there thinking there's just no way in the world. I wouldn't have if any of my daughters came to me, they'd be out of there. I mean, we'd go on the run, or something like that. And I'm not saying, it was the emotional and mental, I think, was daily. And then any physical outbursts, were kind of just explosive with his own anger issues, but I didn't know what would trigger it. I remember just jokingly saying to him one time, he was sitting there in the pool and had a glass of whiskey, and I had a friend that was going to come over, and he said, no, you don't need to have anybody over today. And I was like, well, she's already on her way. And he's like, well, you need to call her and tell her, because I don't feel like having anybody come over. And I jokingly said, well, who are you, the king of the castle? And he literally threw the glass against the brick exterior of our house and shattered it. And he said, you're goddamn right, I'm the king of this castle. And she did not come over that day. I made an excuse. So I started realizing how crazy that this was. And I had to, get out of that. But fortunately, through my work, through the hospital, I was asked to facilitate these workshops, which then had me moving away from the Christian-based, self-awareness, self-help, whatever you want to call it, books, and more into secular body, mind, spirit. And what does spirit mean to you? Because it doesn't have to mean God or a deity or a divine, or what does spirit mean to you? So I started kind of going down that road and started finding my inner peace again. And then after ending that marriage, I was probably just the most content, the most at peace, the happiest I thought I could ever be, living a single life and not having the guilt, the shame, or anything attached to my choices. I knew I was making the best choices for me. I knew I was continuing down a good path and learning and screwing up, but identifying it and redirecting my course and things like that. And, you and I had many, many conversations and just venturing out. And I want to know others' opinions. I don't want to just know the latest, greatest Christian author on women's Bible studies. I don't want every chapter I read to have a fill in the blank at the end, where I got to answer the questions.
Yep.
So I think that was it for me, is just that own deep dive that I did. And I am grateful that came along through my work organization.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've done, I feel like that really encouraged you to do a lot of really good inner work. I mean, I've just, like you said, we've had lots of discussions about that. I think one thing that you said, and I wrote it down, like, I remember those conversations where you were like, I'll be damned if I'm going to be twice divorced, but
right.
Too, like how much, of that is that religious, I don't know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Just that religious training, if you will.
Oh yeah.
you were you at that time were willing to stay in an abusive marriage.
Right.
Like, I think that that's something that the church needs to look at, because that's still going on today, where we, look at women and children who are victims. And, a lot of times the church is like, well, let's figure out a way to keep y'all together. But
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and even in that second marriage, I was still going to a mega church and going, by myself. And then, he would have waves of wanting to be a better person, and then waves of falling back to his old ways.
Which is typical of an abuser. It's typical. It's a cycle of an abuser.
And typical, I think, of his upbringing. I mean, literally growing up in a religious cult, he was trying to figure it out. So, I mean, I don't have any hard feelings for him. And I think that was one of the hardest things for him to realize, that I had forgiveness for him, and I just wanted him to be a better person. And we were never going to reconcile, but I wanted him to be a better person for him. But I mean, even in the mega church we were going to, he felt the Spirit one day, and he goes down to the front, and next thing you know, 2 weeks later, he's getting baptized. And of course, the applause of the mega church, and always turned his ways. No. I mean, he had so much more work to do. And I mean, I don't have any contact with him now, and don't have any clue, but gosh, I hope he has. And I think he has the ability to do that and be on his own path, whatever that is. But that was just like, okay, check, got another one,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though, that was still going on. And for me, I think a turning point in that relationship, where I started hearing the voice I thought I knew as a child, that divine, that voice of God or whoever, I was in the middle of a 2-hour lecture from him, where I'm sitting on the couch. I'm not able to get up, he's just lecturing me about, I don't even remember, just every wrong thing I've done as a wife. And just, I'm sure he sat through those lectures as a child. And I just remember this peace come over me that just said, tomorrow he'll be at work, because he worked a 24-hour shift and then was off for 48. Tomorrow he will be at work, and you will leave. And that was just almost a mantra. Tomorrow he will be at work, and you will leave. You will have a way out. You will have a way out. And my children didn't know what was going on, but I called my youngest daughter, who was getting ready to get married, and she was actually staying at her now husband's house, but her fiance at the time, she was just staying with him but she still had this lease on her apartment. And I went to her apartment for the next 2 weeks until he got all his stuff out of the house, and came back, and my kids came, and we changed all the locks and, things like that. And the other really poignant thing for me, again, I'm trying to change him. I'm trying to be the Christian example. I'm trying to be the dutiful wife, that if you will do it long enough, you can have the blessing of your husband coming to know the Lord, and coming around and seeing the light, and being the godly leader he's supposed to be. So I, was doing all that. And again, don't really know what the argument was, but I was in the kitchen. He was on the other side of the kitchen. And next thing I know, he's like hurling slices of pizza at my head. And I made a beeline for the back door, and he came around, and he, had his arm around my throat. And I went to kind of hit him to get him off me. And something stopped me in my tracks. And the voice inside said, "Do not touch him." And I didn't. And he let me go. And, I was gone after that. So, it was just, so I don't know but it just didn't feel like my words. I didn't feel like I had those words. So, but maybe it was that part of me that was like, I know, instinctively, don't do this, don't do that, or whatever. But, I kind of feel like it was the beginning for my way back to, okay, figure out who God is to you. in your life? How does God show up in your life? How do you show up in other people's lives? And, learning the boundaries, and, like you said, a lot of work with the research and the data that Brene Brown has collected and brought forth. And it's been very beneficial.
I think like Glennon, like when you were talking about that, I thought of Glennon Doyle because she talks so much about that inner knowing. And I think that is true. And whether you want to call it the divine or God, or just like that is you, at your core, that's
right.
that the you that's always been there that was telling you, do not touch him. However,
Right.
whoever you want to give credit to, but knowing that was your inner knowing at the time that was, in that situation, because I think, we have to be so careful because every kind of abusive situation is different. And,
Right.
There may have been another time where you would have fought. But in this particular case, your inner knowing was telling you that wasn't what you needed to do.
Right.
I also thought it was really interesting that you were talking about, if I could just be the, dutiful wife and the best Christian wife, that I can save him. And I mean, I've had those same thoughts, not to save Karl, but just, if I'm just meek and mild, then things will go great in the ministry. If I can just, cross all the T's and dot all the I's just the right way, everything will be great. And it's interesting because as soon as you said that, I wrote down, it's either our responsibility or it's our fault.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember other people in the church back in my first marriage, and one of my friends, she was Christian and her husband was not, and all that, it was causing some real issues in their marriage as well. Again, because she threw herself wholeheartedly into it, kind of like I did. And then you're kind of disappointed when you get home and you don't have this, what you think it's supposed to be. And her only counseling from, pastors and deacons was, well, you made the choice to marry somebody that you were unequally yoked to. So now your responsibility is to be that example and help to soften his heart, and he will eventually find his way. Well, they're also divorced. So, now he did eventually find his way, but it didn't help their marriage,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
You knew at an early age who God is.
mhm.
And like Laura's talking about, it's what we hear in the desert a lot. People say, things really changed. I found out, when I started deconstruct, I didn't know who I was, but they say, but then I went inside and I learned to trust myself.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And when that happened, not only do you know who you are, but it clarifies, the images you have of the divine, of God, of creator, source, whatever. But it clarifies a lot of that. You have a husband now.
Yes.
He's a good guy.
He is.
He's not very religious, or he's not religious at all.
No, did not grow up in the church at all. He remembers people commenting to his mom. He has an older brother, and people would come up to his mother and say, they are just so well behaved for you not bringing them up in the church. As if one has to do with the other.
Right. I agree. I don't think that they have anything to do with each other.
Yeah.
No.
So, I got to hang out with him a little bit this past week and had a great time. What is, if you were to describe, okay, this is my spiritual well-being right now. I don't think anybody, especially out here in the desert, expects you to be perfect, expects everything to be roses. And, there's days I had a stroke. There's days I get frustrated. There's days, I just want to give up. And but there's other stuff too. There's peace and things like that. How would you describe we talked to a guy just a couple hours ago, and I was trying to remember exactly what he said. But it was, I forgot. But he was just describing that I've never felt this way, and he was a bishop and a pastor and everything else, and went through a deconstruction. So just that simple question, how would you describe your state of well-being now?
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing is just the peace. And, I moved away from organized religion after, the end of my second marriage, and I've never gone back and don't plan to, and even have been able to have conversations with a couple of my daughters who are very, much part of the Southern Baptist religion, and raising the grandchildren, and that's all fine with me. Everybody make their choice. I can have those conversations. I think they're a little worried about me, but I would expect that because of the religion that they're in right now. But I've just, and I just tell them, I was like, I've never been at such peace. I've never known who I was so intuitively, and been okay with that, and don't feel like I need to defend it, and I can just live who I am. And like I said, was just perfectly content being single the rest of my life. And Bart just happened into my life. We happened to have worked together for the past 13 years and just knew each other as coworkers and things like that. And I always say that's one of the good things that came out of the pandemic, was we were both working in a hospital. Neither one of us could be around anybody else. So we started binge watching Netflix together, and it just kind of, went from there. He likes to say I kept cooking and he kept coming back, so, but just to not be afraid to share views, to have conversations. It's such a good feeling to know that anxiety or defensiveness is not going to well up in me because somebody has an opposing view, because I go back to remembering how defensive I got about the Lutheran religion, or how defensive I would get about, the Baptist, defending that, or how I tried to have a conversation with somebody about Catholicism and asked a question and she got super defensive, and I don't have any of that. But I also think my approach is so much softer now, because it truly is one of just wanting to know. I want to sit, I want to listen, I want to absorb, and I'm open to anything. And it got me back to, for me, God is love, God is warmth, God is all accepting, God is, my children believe in a literal hell and I don't, and even my 7-year-old grandson, we went on a little Nona date yesterday. They call me Nona. And as you know, I'm telling your viewers, but and he said something about, I'm glad I'm not a bad guy. And I said, well, I'm glad you're not a bad guy too. And he goes, because bad guys go to HE double hockey sticks. And I kind of just had to, not say anything, because I was like, right here, right now, it's not my place. Right here and right now, as a 7-year-old, this isn't the conversation to have. But I'm looking forward to open conversations. And I don't think Bart would ever have been in my life at any other stage in my life. And he is just the most, amazing human being, and has always felt so confident and knowing who he is and the kind of person he is. And he, it's one thing I still, going back to that prayer, we had to pray. I still have nights where I wake up filled with anxiety of, oh my gosh, I haven't prayed and I can't even tell you how long. What if? And then I feel like I've got to say this prayer, and, and he doesn't have that, I still have this fear, anxiety of dying, and he doesn't understand that. It's just, and so I think that fear of death and separation has another level for Christians, because you're like, not only am I going to be separated from those here that I love on earth and those relationships, but if I didn't do this right, I'm spending eternity in hell.
We're going to be separated forever, like eternity.
Right. I just, yeah.
Well,
I get that picture, the picture of that astronaut in the movie Gravity, where he's just floats off and it's like, oh my God, that's all there is, an abyss,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I've shared with you, like, yeah, the fear of death is, I've struggled with that too. I struggle with at night, all of a sudden having a bunch of anxiety and stuff like that. I think it would be really interesting to, and maybe there's one that's already out there, but to have somebody do a study on, like the levels of anxiety of people that were not brought up in religion versus those that have, that were steeped in religion. Because I'm just curious, how many people, because that's part of it too, is like, well, who do we tell? Like, I'm not supposed to be anxious about anything.
You're supposed to know where you're going.
Yeah. You're not supposed to. Yeah. And it's almost like, if you're anxious, then you're not trusting God enough. You don't have enough faith, and it just snowballs,
right?
All that guilt and shame just snowballs on top of itself. So yeah, I'd be really curious, because I'm constantly asking that question of like people that we have on the podcast, like, or maybe I don't ask them, but I definitely ask Karl afterwards. I'm like, I just don't get it. Like, they used to be this diehard Pentecostal or Southern Baptist, you name the religion, and now they have this different view of God. And I'm just like, I can't get to that place. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah, I think for you, it's with, it's saying those words like Christian and God.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So on,
there's more work I got to do for sure.
Because you're not.
Oh, I know, me too. I still, will say, well, like a friend of mine, Laura, you and I were talking about this, but a friend of mine, said something, oh, is that when you were saved? And I was like, saved? I hadn't heard that word in forever. And it just felt so foreign to me. And so I think when some of those words start to become foreign to you, but I stumble over, oh gosh, do I say Christianity? Do I say God? Do I say divine? I'm still working through that as well. And do I get it right? Do I say this or that right? And I get it. And I'm in the midst of a lot of that as well. And it's good because, Bart and I can have a conversation, and he's got just such a completely different perspective. But I did think it was interesting when I found out, Bart's got two sons, and one identifies as being agnostic and the other identifies as being an atheist. I don't worry about their afterlife any more than I do my two daughters or all four of my kids that would probably say they're Southern Baptist. I don't. And I just think it's because my belief system has changed so drastically because of who God is to me. And I hope it only, I get more and more clarity, because I'm right there with you on not having the clarity at all times about it, for sure.
Yeah.
So, Karen, believe it or not, we're running out of time already.
Wow, that was easy.
There's a question we never prepare anybody for, but we always ask something similar to this. And that is, what would you put on your billboard, or what do you want to say to everyone out there? What do they all need to know? You've had an interesting life, and lots of different twists and turns, but now you're at this place. What do you want to tell everybody?
I think for me, my thing right now is, for so many years, I focused on being courageous, but being courageous with kindness. And for me, I'm all about just learning what empathy truly is, and just sitting in a space with somebody, and just having more people just willing to just sit in spaces with people and be empathic and be kind and loving. And, I told Laura, I said, we can all have our own opinion, but you make the decision on if you're going to, share your opinion kindly, or, is it going to be defensively, or is it going to be, what's it going to be? And I'm just all about the compassion and kindness. And I think that's how we need to live our lives and invite others into our lives. And I just think, honestly, I think I know it's kind of the thing to say right now, but it truly is. It's in this world right now where you don't see compassion, empathy, and you sure don't see kindness. I just think that has got to become the focus. And for me, that has nothing to do with religion or Christianity or anything like that. It has to do with getting to know who you are in your inner being, and letting that light come out, and, just being open. It's probably too much for a billboard, but that's kind of it.
Your billboard can be as big and as long as you.
well, there is that Dallas traffic. They'd have plenty of time to read it.
Oh my God. Yeah. And I think to add to that, because I agree with that 100%, but also, like, when you're sitting with people, you don't need to defend your opinion to them.
No.
You don't need to fix them. Like, just allow them to be. And hopefully you're with someone who can allow you to be as well,
Exactly. Yeah.
Said not too long ago was, maybe instead of listening to so many sermons, we should have been listening to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
We could take back a lot of that time and just sit and listen without judgment and say, me too.
Right.
That.
Yeah.
Yep.
I wonder how many people, I wonder how many people wouldn't be hurting right now had we listened to each other in Sunday school about struggling marriages, about children with, addiction or mental illness, or, just focusing on mental well-being and things like that, and less about praying about it.
Or getting the doctrine right, or,
Right.
Or memorizing the Nicene Creed, or
exactly.
the Lord's Prayer, and all those things that really don't matter. Well, I think you are not on social media.
Correct.
For you. But I think that a lot of things that you've shared here today, especially like with, your story of just, religion. I think you had like so many like stories within stories about your life, just the religious aspect, the abuse aspect. I do think that it's going to help so many people. But if someone, like, I can just picture like a woman who's out there, or a man for that matter, who like just needs someone to talk to. And I mean, I can attest to this, that you are a great listener. Is there a way that people can get a hold of you if somebody is just like, I'd really like to reach out to Karen and just talk to her about my situation?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, the only thing I have is email. So,
okay. I mean, are you willing to share that? I don't want.
Oh, sure.
Put it in the. You can mention it here, and we can also put it in the show notes. But, if you want to share that, just real quick before we sign off, what is?
Yeah, it's Karen, Karen, the number 3, then Casey, Casey @gmail.com.
Okay, perfect. We will add that to it. Well, I know we just saw you a couple of days ago, but it's always good to talk to you.
It is. I know. It's like we can have a 4-hour conversation and then we text, oh, I forgot one thing.
I know. Karl is always like, aren't you going to see her like tomorrow? And your point is?
Yeah. I don't know how one thing has to do with the other.
Exactly.
Not to comment on that.
Anyway, thanks for being on the podcast today. And
thank you. I appreciate your time.
when you wake Bart up for his night shift, make sure that you tell him that we love him and keep being a great guy, I guess.
I will. And y'all take care.
All right.
So for all the listeners out there, we thank you for joining in today. If you like what you hear from Karen, please reach out to her. Maybe even just to let her know that's something, because it takes a little vulnerability and bravery
courage
to share your story.
Yep.
And we appreciate that. And I know you do too. So as always, be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary.
Remember, all that wander in the desert are not lost. We hope that you know
you are seen,
you are heard,
and you are loved.